Good morning, Czech. We are very happy to be here this morning to discuss some of our experiences and how we manage our endpoints using Nessus and PDQ. I'm David Nance. I'm the Director of IT Campus Services at Pitt State. And I'm joined this morning by a couple of my colleagues here. I'll have them introduce themselves.
All right. My name is Jan Cooper and Assistant Director of IT Technical Support here. Formerly had about 13 years as a sysadmin.
And I'm Amanda Williams, and I am the Information Security Officer. And I've been at Pitt State for, it'll be 20 years in July, which is forever. Various roles within ITS, but currently the IT Security Officer.
Okay, thank you guys. I'd also like at this point to recognize all the hard work of our campus services technicians over the last couple of years that worked on this project, implemented these products we're going to talk about. They've done a great job, and I definitely want to give them thanks for all that they've done to make this work. So credit where credit is due. Before we get started, I would like to say if you have any questions during the presentation, please post them to the chat or the Q&A, I guess preferably the chat, where we can see them. And we will try to address those questions within the context of the presentation, not try to save them to the end. If this turns into a discussion as opposed to a monologue, then that's perfectly fine with us. So let us know if you do have anything you would like us to focus on. Okay, quick summary of what we're going to talk about today. Thank you. First, Amanda's going to talk about where we started with this project and why. Then Shinyan will discuss the use of the Nessus scanner on our network to define what was needed, remediate some of the initial results, and then continue to monitor and keep us in compliance. And then Jan and I will talk about our use of the PDQ inventory and deploy tools to remediate those findings. And then lastly, we will talk about some of what we've learned, some of our future plans, things that we're still working on to make better. The software that we'll be discussing this morning, next slide. We will not try to live demo these this morning, but we do have them on standby if there are questions or discussions that arise that might benefit from a live demo. We can try and pull them up and make them work, but for the most part, we'll rely on screenshots to show you a little bit about what we're doing. First of all, it'll be the Nessus security scanner. This tool has been around a long time. I'm sure many or most of you have seen it before. Started out as an open source project, went private. At that point, it was forked into several other products, including OpenVAS, which we've also used here initially, but we depend on Nessus now. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, it is a security scanner. It has a huge database of that it pulls from the CVE community and from the NIST National Vulnerability Database, and it uses those to scan the endpoints of a network in various ways, which Jan will talk about how we have that organized in a minute, and gives us some very detailed reports on our status, where we're at, vulnerability severity ratings that we depend on heavily, and also gives a fair amount of information on how the CVE community recommends to remediate those vulnerabilities. The other two products, and they are two independent products, although it's PDQ Inventory and PDQ Deploy. They are independent, but they do function best together. Inventory, as you might expect from the name, is a full-featured comprehensive inventory scanner. It collects a ton of data. It's very useful. We'll talk about some of the features of it later. In particular, the dynamic computer collections that allow you to target things through deploy, and we'll deal with that in a minute. Then deploy, also a very descriptive name, allows us to deploy applications, updates, and a variety of things as well. Why did we choose these two products? Nessus, I think the short answer is it was what was used to evaluate us initially. So we wanted to make sure we were doing self-evaluation using the same tool that we would be evaluated with going forward. So that's that. It's one of the leading products. PDQ, our techs, several of our techs had been using PDQ prior to this project getting started in a free mode. You can actually run both of these products for free. They're a lot of the nice management features of them are not included in the free product, of course, but they do work, and our techs did love them. So as we started into this, several other of the techs we got licensed, enterprise license for them, and it just grew from there to the point where we have used it across campus at this point. Short answer, I guess, would be the reason for PDQ is that it is very easy to use and set up, even though it may be more, like many things, difficult to master. So with that description of what we're going to be doing and the tools that we use, I'll turn it over to Amanda, and she can we'll discuss the origins of this project, where we started, and why.
All right, thank you, David. So back in 2018, we had our first visit from the legislative post audit. We had heard, feedback from the other regents and other schools, kind of what to expect. And we knew that we were going to get dinged on things. I mean, I think that's just, that's expected. As David mentioned, they did use the Nessus security scanner to scan our network. And as we were probably kind of counting on, the scan results were less than desirable. And also at that time, our structure was that we had 3 techs that were under the ITS umbrella, and then we had 6 techs that were out in the 4 colleges that reported to the college deans. So there wasn't a whole lot of collaboration going on between the techs. ITS didn't have a whole lot of say in how things were being handled, or when, as things were getting done, or how things were getting done. So even prior to LPA coming in 2018, in March of 2018, we were in the works of moving those techs, into ITS, and our goal was, more collaboration, more standardization, and support for the techs. There was, a couple of them were, were single techs supporting an area. So, definitely knew that they needed, support, and we knew that we all could benefit from, just everybody working together, everybody being on the same page. We're a small shop, resources are limited. And so you really want to make sure that you're utilizing, your people and your resources, as effectively as you can. So knowing, getting those results back, I think that really kind of, shown us that we were, moving in the right direction. Once we could get everybody, under the same umbrella, everybody all on the same page, that, we knew that we could, make some really good progress with that. So in July of 18, that move of them being in ITS became final. And so that at that point, we, moved on, doing some things in a more standard way, the more collaboration and those sorts of things. I will also mention that this has kind of been a long road. I mean, it seems like a simple process, simple project, but it's kind of taken us a little while to get there. There's been some turnover in the supervisor of the tech role. Of course, 2020 threw everybody for a loop too, and so there was that we were all trying to deal with. But I feel like here in the last several months, we're making some good progress. I can really see, the techs coming together, collaborating, working together on stuff and really making, some really great progress and putting us in a lot better spot. So we know LPA will be back at some point, fully expect them to be back, maybe not on campus, but for a follow-up visit. And I'm very confident that we are in a much better place than where we were several years ago. So kind of with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jan and let him explain kind of how we've set up Nessus.
All right. Good morning, everybody. So we're going to kind of talk about just what we did for Nessus. I mean, if you've never ran Nessus before or something like that, they give you a web site that you can log on to. We did an on-prem server here that we run everything from. There's a lot of options within Nessus that we can do. However, for our needs and what we're running right now, we just pretty much do the big basic scan. And that just goes out and does its own auto collection stuff and finding some vulnerabilities and some areas of opportunities that we need to clean up across our workstations and servers. And so in doing this, there's multiple different ways that we can do this process. And we had it originally set up in kind of some testing, and one of it was kind of more by department based, or kind of by tech ownership area. And as I started taking on this project, after there's some initial setup done, I got looking at that and decided to change it up a little bit, because one of the things I was thinking about is, well, that's great to have it based off of an AD group or a certain name or something like that off a host name. But what about that one device that slips through the cracks, that doesn't get a host name, and it doesn't, we're not aware of it? So that kind of led me to believe that, the best solution for us was going to be to do a subnet design. So we've laid out our Nessus setup to where it's based on faculty staff subnet, printer VLAN, there's a printer subnets, and also a lab subnet. So here in a second, you'll see on the next slide that kind of our schedules are set up. We've got schedules set up to run every day of the month continuously, and it just goes out each day and scans a different subnet, and then we get reports based off of that. So in the event that there is a rogue device out there that somehow gets on the network, everybody would hope that would never happen, but kind of that better be protected than not. We would see a device that shows up as an IP instead of a host name, and then we know, okay, well, maybe we should check into that, because maybe just a process was slipped through the cracks, that it didn't get actually a host name entered or fully registered correctly, and then we can find that out. So that's kind of why we want the subnet design in each building, based on the faculty and staff and printer and lab VLAN. So like I said, the scans, they're scheduled to run pretty much daily. And on that, if you see here, this is kind of our building subnet scan that we have. Like for our library, it's going to be on the 17th day of the month. And then a few other our buildings out there. We try to not have too many buildings per day, just because when this goes out and starts scanning the network, it could cause some congestion if we said go scan everything everywhere. And then there are also some devices out there that just don't like to be scanned, and it could take them offline. We have seen where Nessus can mess up with some printers, some specialty printers in our print shop, and it can actually drop them because it just doesn't like the scan that comes in on it. So if you notice on the schedule, one of the things that I struggled with doing when we were making the schedule up was picking a day. When you do it monthly by a date of the month, not always is that going to fall on a weekday. So this month it might be a Friday, next month it might be a Sunday or a Saturday. We decided just to leave it that way. It'll pick up what it can. This is far better of a schedule than what we had been doing in the past, prior to the LPA the audit. And we just said, you know what, at least we're getting some data. There are still going to be machines on campus that will probably be online or picked up. So we're not too worried about it. in order to schedule something where it's not, I have a reoccurring schedule where it's only during the weekdays only, was a lot more challenging to get it within Nessus. So we kind of left it there. Our goal is to do like faculty staff subnet at, like, we kind of felt at lunchtime, or like mid to late morning lunchtime was better, because most machines are going to be on, so we get a better hit rate on that when we get our scans back. The printer VLAN and subnet stuff will go at a different time. That one, most printers are online all the time. We feel we can run that either after hours or anytime, and it's not that big of a deal. We're just trying not to do it everywhere. And then again, the labs were set up because then we're able to do reports specifically on certain labs based on their location. And if there was something that we needed to fix, then we would have that whole lab say, okay, there is a vulnerability, or there is some stuff that needs updated. Let's go out and take care of that. All right, so on this next slide, we're getting to the point where we're starting to drill down into one of the areas that we have out there in this group. So if you notice, this is kind of a view you get. The black box is not what you see technically. That's just the host names. We've kind of blocked that out for our protection. It's a little bit better. And so all on the left side, the hand side here, you're going to have your host names or IPs. If you have a check mark to set up, return a host name, it will. But if it doesn't have a host name for it, it can't get one, it will just list that IP address down there. It will scan everything in that block for that subnet. So gateway all the way up to the very end, and it'll list everything. Even if there's something that is not attached to the IP, it tries it and it doesn't show any results. That's kind of what you get. You just get every IP address listed, and as it goes through. So in this case, in this location, the policy that ran was a basic network scan. It completed. It took a little over an hour and a half to complete this whole scan of the whole subnet. And, you know, the vulnerabilities here in the chart shows you just a quick glance at everything. This one we're actually doing pretty good on. We don't have any critical. Our method here is if a report or a scan shows critical, we look at that first, and we go in and try to fix that as soon as possible. And then in this view here, where there's the yellow on the top line, say that says 15, that's going to be your mediums in there. You can click on that actually, and it would open up and it would show you the devices that had it, and as well as what that is, what they're considering to be a medium vulnerability, whether that is, we see a lot of Chrome, you know, I don't know, Chrome seems to update every other day. And so it's kind of one of those things that you're always probably going to have Firefox, Chrome on this list as either a critical or a high or medium, you know, some TLS stuff and various other things that are out there as well. And so once you click on that, this is the view that you're going to get. It's showing all the different vulnerabilities out there. It gives you a count on the right-hand side of how many devices or how many instances of that vulnerability is out there. That count doesn't always mean it's an actual separate device. And so we've kind of seen it multiple reporting, especially within the browsers and stuff like that for one machine. Especially if it's more outdated, it kind of lists all the newer updates that could be done on there, and it's as a something that needs to be implemented. And so all this stuff is just off the basic detection, and that's why we felt just leaving it there was going to be the best. And then the one thing that we do as we're setting up the Nessus scans to go to all the techs so they're aware of what needs to be done, so they can kind of put a plan together and start attacking this and reducing at least the criticals and the highs. And then we feel once that gets kind of under control in some places, some months are different. It just depends. If you've never ran this before in your environment, don't be alarmed if you do have a lot of critical or highs. That's just part of the process, because it does go out and scan for a lot of different apps and settings. And so we put in a plan together to attack, like I said, by critical and high, and then that's where we actually come into our next product, what David was talking about with PDQ, inventory and deploy. And so we'll kind of move into that and show you how we leverage Nessus information to help us set up procedures and excuse me, automated deployment packages. Excuse me. Okay, automated deployment packages to apply some of these fixes out there based on the subnet. So, okay. All right. So in PDQ, we decided, like, okay, we have a lot of different setups out there. There's a lot of different ways we can do this. What would be the best for us to help manage what's in Nessus for a fix? Otherwise, it's go to each computer individually, set it up, apply the fix via either a PowerShell script or something else that we've got on there, group policies. But we wanted something that was a little easier, that all the techs can use, and just say, hey, we're going to create one package and use this, instead of trying to pass it on. Each tech is responsible for different areas within the Active Directory organization. So this kind of streamlined our process a little bit. And so what we did is we actually went into PDQ and created the same setup with the subnet look. And so if we have a subnet that needs Chrome updated, well, that's pretty easy. We go into PDQ, and then we create the package that says deploy the latest Chrome update to that subnet, and it's done. All machines are done in that subnet that are online at the time. And then we also can set up PDQ to do a heartbeat, where that heartbeat basically says, hey, I'm going to keep an eye on all these machines, and if it doesn't have this package, it will, the minute it comes online and it checks in with PDQ, it'll deploy that package to it, and it'll deploy that fix. One of the cool things that we found out early on within PDQ is PDQ, if you don't know what PDQ is, or it's first time hearing about it, it's very similar to what Microsoft offers through SCCM. It is just not as gnarly to set up and challenging for small shops to manage and control. It's super simple on the setup piece of it. And then, you know, the adoption rate, once you get it set up to learn how to deploy packages and create collections and do this other stuff, was really simple. Where there's a lot of moving parts to SCCM. You know, you kind of, in some cases, when you're starting out from scratch, SCCM can be kind of a nightmare to get everything going and populated throughout your environment. This was a breeze. And it just allows us to do some cool things. The people that run PDQ, and David might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they actually used to work for Microsoft and SCCM, and they realized that SCCM was such a big product that small shops didn't benefit from it. And so they left, created PDQ on their own, and mainly geared it towards smaller you know, institutions and businesses out there, and provided kind of where SCCM fell short in some areas or was more difficult, they made it an easier way. So the cool, another cool thing that we have within PDQ, not only, like I said, is it allows us to kind of mimic what we have in Nessus set up and apply and deploy the fixes for that pretty easily in all the different areas. It comes with some pre-built packages. So PDQ by default, you can bring in, they update all different browsers and a whole bunch of different subsets of software that's out there that you don't have to create that package for. You can actually go in there and set up a reoccurring schedule that, like, say, once a month, you're going to go check all the machines and it's going to go update Chrome for you automatically. So it's a set it, forget it, you're done. And you know, and coming from a sysadmin position for so long in my career, well, that's handy, just to be able to sit there and say, hey, I never have to go out and update Chrome or Firefox or any other software that's a package deal. I can just say it's always going to be there. PDQ handles the latest revision of that software, and so all you have to do is set it up and go. And so if you are a place where you have limited resources to manage things and all that, and you want to give yourself some time back for more research and development and stuff, PDQ is great for that, because again, you can set up so many different things on a recurring schedule, and where you're not having to manage it all the time. So I'll kind of touch base a little bit, and I think David's going to step in here as well and help out this next bullet point. But PDQ is more geared towards workstations. Being a Windows Server admin for the past 13 years here, I have brought in my servers into this environment. There are some cool things we can do. Again, it's really nice for my servers because automated process, I set it and forget it with the browsers on there and a few other software titles. I don't ever have to worry about them being updated. They're always up to date. The problem is right now, PDQ does not do anything with the Windows updates for servers. There are some Windows updates that you can do and manage and kick off for workstations, but not at the server level. I believe that's something that they might be working on in the future, but primarily most people use the PDQ for workstation management. And then one thing you might notice is that, I'm bringing up a lot of Windows machine names like that. I'm not really touching on Macs a lot. Right now, they don't do anything to support the Macs with this. And in our campus, what we did for that was we use a product called Jamf, and JAMF, and all of our devices are brought in through Apple's MDM and registered, and then Jamf takes up and kind of does some stuff there where you can actually deploy software from, get inventory information and all that. So again, what we can do is take the information from Nessus. If there was something out there and we saw it was a Mac device, we can then go over to Jamf, a different software, and push out some updates and stuff like that from a single dashboard. And so that's how we cover our Mac environment on campus, is through Jamf. So, okay. David, what else am I forgetting on some of this here?
Yeah, I think you did a very good job. I think one of the specific examples that I would bring up in this context at this point would be the ability to respond to vulnerabilities that's not necessarily picked up by the Nessus scanner, but that we hear about through the press or whatever. A very recent example of that would be the Dell dbutil.sys driver access control vulnerability that hit the press about, I guess it was 2 weeks ago now. In our environment, our techs noticed this notification, and by the next morning, we had a report scanner built in PDQ that could detect the presence of that .sys file on all of our computers in our inventory. And then shortly later, the same day, we had I believe it was PowerShell-based scanner that was able to remove it. So that process took place much, much faster. And I think it could have ever have been done if we did not have PDQ in our environment. So point that out as a specific example. Jan touched on the managed packages. This is a fantastic feature that PDQ offers. It's, 200 plus, I think, common applications and updates and various other things that are managed by PDQ and can just be set into schedule it and forget it type update cycles. It's very, very handy and very useful. Windows updates also, as Jan pointed out, are possible for desktop endpoint type operating systems. We've most recently used it heavily for deploying Windows 10 2009 20H2 and it does a very good job for those machines that don't auto update for whatever reason. There are several other particular features that we could talk about. Time is going to run short here, but our exposure, the question that was posted, by the time we actually started running the report, remediation had already started, and we had in initial scans, we had about 150, 160 machines. So I suspect there were many more than that out there, but it had already been, the scanner was in process to begin removing it before we actually started counting heavily. I think at this point, and we can rerun that report at will to get a up to the minute statistic, but we were below 100 last I looked. That's mostly machines that are locked down, deep freeze, offline for whatever reason. So we're very near having it completely out of our environment. So very pleased with that.
Yeah. One thing too that we use PDQ a lot for is in our deployment of new computers. You know, COVID was with all this COVID stimulus money for the state was doing everything else. For some reason, a lot of computers were purchased, and so we use MDT right now to push out some images through a Pixie boot, and then what was cool was we were able to leverage PDQ in a way that based on either a computer name or something like that, you had kind of a task sequence set up to where that computer got a certain set of software and applications. So realistically, it was as soon as you Pixie boot and you hit it and you gave it the name and you pick the image you want, it would image it, reboot, come back up, check in with PDQ, get its task sequence stuff, go through all the software that needed to be installed, join it to the domain, everything else, reboot, come back up. And when it came back up, it was done. It could technically go on the desk of somebody's office, or it could be a whole lab that could be done. And so it's reduced a lot of the hand holding and manual processes that might go on in some areas with imaging and stuff. So that's been a big benefit to us. It's allowed a lot more automation to come in, which when there's automation, it can reduce a lot of manual errors as well. So that's kind of one thing that we're using it for as well. PDQ also has an extensive reporting capability. Not only just the generic reporting that's out there that's provided, you can even dive down into SQL reporting where you're creating your own SQL query stuff through their SQL query area. I'm not going to say it's full SQL. It's kind of similar. There's just some different ways to do it, but that would allow you to pull data from different areas. Once you've kind of worked through their product and their actual query language, you can just set up any type of query you want and get a report off of it. So if you got somebody that's wanting something that's specific, create it and go. The reports have come in quite handy for us too. Just various different things that we wanted to know. And so if leadership says, hey, well, this new exploit that just came out that David talked about, I want to know the machines that have it on there. Boom, a simple report sent out, clear and concise information to give to leadership. They don't need to deep in the weeds details, but they just want to know what's out there and the exposure and machines names and stuff like that. That's really easy to create, and typically it's within a 5 to 10 minute thing to do. Most cases faster than that. So I'm going to show you PDQ Deploy screen up here. And if anybody notices the Nessus name up top, you get 10 points. So, this is kind of a screenshot of PDQ and what we're looking at. What I have selected here is our container for Nessus fixes. And this is what we're talking about. So we came in and there was a time that we needed to do the disabled TLS 1.0. that was set up and done. That's a package that gets pushed out and deployed. Each one of these little scorpion looking like shield kind of weird things here is going to be an actual package that was created by one of the techs, and it has been set up to run. So we house everything in its own container for Nessus, because then we can go back at any point in time and see it. Some of these might have a heartbeat on them, some of them may not. Again, the heartbeat would be once the device comes back online. With work from home and everything else over the past year, some devices were not able to be seen by PDQ. We have, and we'll kind of talk about some of that here coming up and towards the end, some future stuff that it looks like they're going to be coming out with. But initially, if it's not on your network, and your ACL rules and your firewall and all that is not set up correctly, you don't see anything off your campus. We have remedied that recently. So now if we have devices that are on VPN, we can see those devices inside PDQ. We can also deploy and manage and get reports off of that. So that made it nice. We didn't have to install any other type of product or anything else. We just had to do some ACL changes to allow the VPN network to communicate with PDQ. And so that's helped us a lot with people at home. If they have any questions, or help keeping them updated, because just because people are working from home doesn't mean we get a freebie on maintaining their systems. And so we still need to protect our assets and make sure that our clients are having the best experience possible. And PDQ really has helped us out in doing that, both on campus and work from home. And so let's say you have somebody that travels a lot, whether it's a recruiter or something else like that, and they're not in the office very much, you just tell them to jump on VPN and they can get the latest updates. And so it's just been really beneficial. So
Jan, we have a question in the chat, if we could interrupt just briefly.
Sure. No problem.
Are you working with using some of the local Windows patching tools, using PDQ or other management tools? I did look at the URL that was posted there, Joel, briefly, and I don't think we've used any other. We basically stick with PDQ. So not very informative, but that is the answer. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Joel, in our environment, we do SUS, and as a SUS manager, I would push those updates out. There's a lot of different theories and methods out there that you can do. You can force the updates and, set an expiration period. So if certain date comes up, it'll automatically install. We don't do something like that here. We kind of rely on some of the stuff in PDQ to push out and help us out there. Yeah, I'd be interested to know what kind of some of the other patching tools you might be referring to on that. If it was just SUS, or if there's something else you're using. So.
Okay, looks like we've got about 7 minutes left, so let's move on. Unless you have something else there, Jan, you wanted to share?
Nope, just showing that,
Okay.
and then
let's move on to what we've learned and where we're headed in the future. Let's go next slide, although the flowers are very pretty. I guess the first thing we would say, one of the first challenges we've learned is that there is no direct connection between Nessus and PDQ right now, at least that we're aware of. So we're wanting to develop that to some degree. Might be wishful thinking, but it would be optimal to allow Nessus and PDQ to actually function a little more integrated, so we don't have to have a tech manually translate reports from Nessus into actionable packages in PDQ. Definitely something we're looking at. Another one of the areas that we've had challenges with is, and I think Jan had already discussed this somewhat, is locked machines and offline computers that have gone to sleep, not accessible to us over the network for whatever reason. We're looking at some options in terms of bioscheduled wake times. We also use deep freeze as a lock tool, security tool. You can do client maintenance windows in deep freeze, and we may be looking at that as well to cut down on the number of a redeployment attempts we have to make for machines that are not on the network or locked down for whatever reason. There are, in that context of the locked machines, there are ways in inventory to filter for those machines that are have deep freeze installed, and also on their state, whether they're frozen or thawed or other. So that makes it very handy when you're scheduling those deployments. Jan just discussed the outside the firewall management, and we've got some options there that we do work for us, but there are some other things that we may be looking at, including a Microsoft Remote Access Server option that PDQ actually has trotted out that we have looked at, have not touched yet, but might be an interesting thing to look at. And then the other thing, consistency, and then the audit trail is really kind of go hand in hand. We've got, I think, 10 licenses now to the enterprise product. We've got a lot of people using it, and they're doing a very good job with it, but everyone does a little bit differently. I think as time goes on, we'll try and emphasize consistency and how that tool is used. And also, there's a lot of somewhat of a lack of an audit trail built into it. A lot of the packages are date and time stamped, but they're not necessarily stamped with who created them or why or what status they are. Sometimes people have started creating a package and stopped for whatever reason, and that package is still there, and subsequent people come along and they're not really sure what the status of that package is, whether it's usable or not. So we've got some improvements to make in there as well. Jan, you've got anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I do recommend, and I think it was kind of, we zoomed right by one of the cool features that PDQ offers as well. We did bring it up briefly, but touch base that it is fully capable to have PowerShell packages created. So if you're one that just loves PowerShell and you have experience with it and you got scripts already made, you can implement those scripts within a PDQ package and it'll go out and do it for you that way. So you don't always have to do it based off of kind of a GUI interface or anything. If there's information you want, certain things you want to do. If you want to report in your own way because you got a whole bunch set up through PowerShell, you can run that package and that would kick out your report to you, and that method. So that was one thing that was really cool, was that they do incorporate PowerShell within PDQ, and they let you do certain things. And I believe they also have their own little area that they kind of have some pre-created, just a little.
There's a GitHub, yeah, with pre-populated PowerShell scanners. I'm glad you brought that up. We wouldn't want to have forgotten that.
Well, I guess this time, does anybody have any last minute questions here?
Got about 2 minutes.
Yeah. And you guys, if this is something you're interested in, you're always welcome to just look us up here at Pitt State and give us a call. We'd be more than happy to talk with you in more detail.
Well, to the PSU team, just thank you so much for your presentation and for walking us through all this and taking our questions. It's been really great, and we'll have the recording up on the YouTube channel sometime, either today or tomorrow. So yeah, I just wanted to say thanks. Our next session will start at noon, and that's our CIO panel. You can get to it through the sessions, but it'll take place in Zoom. So yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
See you later.